and that feels like is 20. Welcome back to Becky Amio Horse Training, and this is our 15th ride on LR Blue Ambrose. And if you have not been following along, we have been taking this colt through the first 20 rides, and we're now on ride 15. It is 29 degrees here today, and I am going to try riding him in my arena. I had not been riding him out here. I rode some horses out here yesterday. The footing wasn't too bad, so we'll see how it is today. I'm going to try to start speeding him up a little bit in some of our turns and some of our rolls, and use the arena rail where I can on some things, and we'll just see how it goes. Now, I did not warm this colt up before I saddled him. I did not warm him up after I saddled him. I am just trying to get on and go. And the reason I'm doing that is because I need to be able to evaluate him as an individual and be able to let the owner and breeder know whether he's going to be able to handle that or not. There's a lot of horses that I start that are pretty fresh, and they need to warm up regardless of how many rides that they have. So I don't ever recommend just getting on a colt fresh, but it's something that I have to do in my job in order to evaluate them and let the owners and breeders know what they're getting back when they get that horse home. So here again, number 15, and I'm going to get on and see what we get done today. Thank you for watching, and if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you do and like this video. Thanks. I'm going to point a few things out to you right off the bat here. This is where we start to see signs that are being ignored. By not standing still, he's telling us he's not ready to be rode, right? Okay, anytime a horse isn't standing still to be mounted, it's an indication that something's wrong. There's some anxiety. They need to be warmed up properly first. They are playful. They are looking for a way out. So this is just a sign that a lot of people overlook. And when you reflect on the accidents that you've had historically in your career of riding horses, and when you've had accidents, you can look back and go, yep, that was a sign right there, okay? The other thing I want to point out here is I am wearing a soft shell insulated lined pant, and I'm here to tell you that it is not effective for riding. I kind of had to learn the hard way in this particular ride, and I'll point out to you a couple of times where I kind of lose my seat a little bit and lose my grip. But I think Cowgirl Tough just came out with a soft shell insulated fleece lined pant, and I have not seen the material up close, but if it's what I think it is, a lot of people are going to find out the hard way that it's not good for being in the tack. Anyway, you can see right there, he really wasn't wanting to flex around real good for me either, was he? He was kind of wanting to move his feet too much. And I don't want to be the rider that gets on these colts and just hustles them up and makes them go right away and go hard and fast, because that's not conducive to the type of rider that I want to sell these horses to, that I want to promote my horses to. I want somebody that kind of gets up there and can be confident right out from the start. Not every rider is capable of getting after it from the minute they put their foot in the tack. And right here, he has a big hard spook and a runoff with me, and it could have been really, really ugly. And I bent him around just in time. We were heading towards that fence, and I got really, really lucky. But that's where I initially first felt the hard slip in these pants. And all I can do is bend his head around both directions really hard and kind of get him to down regulate. And so what I'm going to do, because he's feeling so good, is I'm going to disengage his hind end a bunch here. And this is what I'm talking about. Most riders don't know how, don't have the stamina, don't have the endurance to do this, or the know-how to do this effectively. And so I don't necessarily want to start out having to do this to him from the very beginning. Now, this is the side of the arena he wants to be on. I'm going to work him really, really hard on this side of the arena. I'm going to disengage his hind end a bunch, and the reason for disengaging the hind end is it takes his power away from him. The other thing that we're getting done here is we're changing directions a lot. So anytime we can change directions, we're teaching them footwork, we're teaching them balance, we're teaching them confidence, and we're just going to keep on doing it until he starts to get quiet. Okay, now with some horses, this could take quite a little time. With him, it actually doesn't take too long for what it is, but most folks aren't going to ride like this. And so I have to correct this here and now and work through this to make him a more user-friendly individual. And let me explain a little bit better what disengaging the hind end is. What I'm doing is, it's like we're doing a turn on the forehand, but with a little bit of speed added. So we want to slow the front end down and kick that hip out, which seems counterproductive. And in any sort of maneuver type deal where we're tracking a cow down or turning a barrel or a pole or roping and whatnot, we don't want them to turn on the hind end, obviously. We want them to turn on the haunches. But I'm kicking his haunches away from the turn to the outside, so kicking them with my left leg to the right, kicking it out. And then when we go to the right, I'm going to kick with my right leg and kick the haunches out. And the reason is it takes away the motor. Okay, so it takes away the strength that he has and the power that he has to be really effective. And when we do that, we get an individual that's a little bit more agreeable and more compliant for us. And it takes away their ability to fight us nearly as hard as they would if they could hold their hind end in place. So when folks ask me, how do you get a horse to move forward, or if you have one that wants to rear and whatnot, you have to be able to disengage the hind end and take away that motor. And now as he starts to settle in and he gets more cadence in his step, I start to make the circle bigger, more comfortable. We're not doing as small of a circle anymore. I'm not bending him so hard and changing directions as hard. So I gradually make the exercise easier and easier and easier, okay? And I'm going to go ahead and work some basic handling here, do a roll out of it. He was actually willing to stop there, but he kind of locked up and didn't want to roll back for me, so I had to spank him on the butt a little bit there. Here he was a little more willing, but when you have this kind of energy, it's actually a really good opportunity to teach them speeding up their feet during these maneuvers, because you do need this impulsion to a degree. Some of the best horses that work this basic handle the best usually are something speed bred, and they're a little hotter headed. I mean, it's the nature of the beast. And so when we have this kind of energy, we go, cool, let's use it, all right? This is what we're going to work on today. And, not every rider is ready to do that every single day, but that's the kind of tricks that you need to have in your pocket. You may start out kind of planning to work on one thing that day with the horse, but they go, oh, nay, we're going to work on something else today, and you have to be ready to change your curriculum at a moment's notice. So the more I work some of these basic handle maneuvers, the better his footwork gets. We're starting to see him come through with his front end a little bit cleaner. He's holding his hind end in place a little bit better. He's almost jumping out of them in a lope. He's taking a pretty fast trot and then going into the lope on his own. And ultimately, that's what we're working towards, is the impulsion to stop, roll away, and pick up new lead right away. That's going to be the most effective horse to ride. So here again, back up a couple steps, set him up and roll him. And look at that. We got out of there on a right lead. It does take some setting them up properly to get it and asking it for it at the very correct moment, because if he falls out of frame, we're going to get the wrong lead and he's going to drop his balance and it's going to be kind of a mess, and we're going to have to break him down and ask for the lead again. Like right there, he's out of balance, he took the wrong lead. Okay, and that's the nature of the beast. Now I'm going to make him lift his shoulder here, I'm going to make him side pass over a little bit because he was dropping to the inside on me a little bit there. Anytime that he drops that shoulder and the rib cage to the inside, I have to feel it and I have to be able to address it. And we're going to see in another couple of rides why that's so important. But this has to be instilled in them in the first 20-30 rides. I cannot tell you how many other trainers I hear from that take those horses at that 30 ride mark or 60 ride mark, and the colts that they're getting cannot do this lateral work. And then they have to teach this lateral work, and they get behind on what their curriculum is supposed to be. So whether they're going to teach their horse to rope, start patterning it on barrels and poles, or start working it on reining and whatnot, if they have to teach this elevated shoulder and rib cage technique and this lateral stuff, it puts them behind schedule. And then, an owner ends up having to pay that much more money to the next guy in line to get them to teach it. And, maybe that isn't that next trainer's forte. Maybe that's not the best thing that they're good at teaching. I think that's something I'm really good at teaching when I start something from scratch. So that's just some stuff to think about right there. And he's kind of being a bully, and he's shoving his rib cage into my leg. So I really have to be aggressive here and go, hey, you get off of my leg right now. And most people don't realize their horses are doing this to them. And most people aren't willing to have this level of discussion with a horse while in the tack. And it's a hard, fast rule, and it's a hard, fast lesson to have. And he's still looking for something to spook at over there. And I tell you what, there are so many horses that spook in that corner of the arena. This is not unusual for me at all. I have had one colt, and it happened to be a stud colt also, that he spun out from under me so fast, dropped me on the ground and stepped on me on my way down. I had the biggest monster bruise on my thigh from it. So it's something that I'm accustomed to at this point. I'm not sure what it is down on that side of the arena, but it gets everybody every time. But what I want to point out here is he's kind of acting like a speed-bred horse here. And this is what I talk about. You have to work at it a lot longer and harder before you get that game over. Like, have you guys noticed? We haven't played game over yet. And we're like almost 15 minutes into this ride, and we have yet to play game over. And I'm trying to get him to a point to play game over, but he wasn't ready to yet. The reason for trying to stop him on this side of the arena and allow him to take a break over here is because I want him to associate this side of the arena with resting, relaxing, getting to take a break. I don't want him to associate it with work. The other side of the arena where I started out disengaging his hind end so hard and fast, that's the side I truly want him to associate with work, because I don't want him drifting off that direction or running off with me that direction again. So I'm going to play game over as much as I can on a long loose rein right in this area and let him get his mind back. And he's still goosing at something. I seriously did not know or have any idea what was over there. There wasn't a dog over there. There wasn't a bunny rabbit. There wasn't a pheasant. I still to this day do not know what was bothering him. So I dismount him for two reasons right here. For one, I wanted to dismount him in the spot that he was spooking at, because then he would at least associate it with, hypothetically being done. But I wasn't done with him. I needed to adjust my saddle. Now, I felt that this saddle, the angle of my bars was correct for him, although I knew the saddle was too wide for him. And I'd been shimming it this whole time up until now. And what I find when I get colts in training is their backs will change about 3 times in the time that I have them. So 3 times in about 2 months, 2 to 3 months of having them in for training, their backs will change. And this guy's back was changing on me. And I had been getting by all right with the with the shimming that I was doing, but my gut feeling was I needed to switch him to a different saddle. So I may do with this one for the rest of the ride, but I am gonna have to put him in a different saddle next time around. And if you have any questions about saddle fit and shimming and bars and bar spread, I do have a few videos that I discuss saddle fit and finding the pocket in your saddle and shimming on my YouTube page, and I can link them in the description box in this video so you can take a look at them. But there's a whole lot more to saddle fit than just gullet width and wide or narrow or quarter horse tree, semi-quarter horse tree. It's really complicated and confusing, and since I ride colts, I generally ride a smaller horse, a narrower horse, but I have to shim to the angles and to the width of the horse. I do have 2 custom saddles that were made different widths and different angles that have been kind of suitable for me the last couple of years and helped me get by. But you can see my saddle pad is kind of starting to run out the back, and when that happens, that's because the saddle is too wide for your horse. Anytime a saddle pushes your saddle pad out the back, it's because it's too wide. I'm trying to let him walk out a little bit, but you can even pick up on how he's walking. He kind of has a nod and bob to him, and he's got some spring in his step, so he is by no means played out at all here. And I'm going to go ahead and work some basic handle with him, and he wants to lock up a little bit on me, and at this point I know he knows what I'm asking for. I just need to be patient and try to keep on putting his feet in the right place and be consistent with how I ask him to help him through it. He has to just learn the footwork and get the muscle memory. Now I'm going to work him off the rail here for a little bit, and you can see where he wanted to drift a little bit there, and I'm using a lot of outside leg on him and trying to push him around so he doesn't drift on me. Off the rail work is really good to teach them their own personal balance. And I'm elevating my inside rein kind of up towards the opposite shoulder, so left rein up towards my right shoulder. I'm wanting him to elevate that shoulder, elevate the rib cage, and not fall into me. So now when I work this next 360, I'm going to break it up into 2 parts. So it's going to be half. So a 180 degree turn, stop, back him up, make another 180 degree turn. And he's a little more willing when I break it up into that sort of manner, and you'll find you'll have that. Some horses can't come through all the way, so you break it up into smaller pieces. About to ask for another 360 again right here. Now I start the first part of the turn, and watch me drop my hands down. That's a relief. That's the release to him saying, okay, you did good. Now he's not wanting to move that hip around, and at this point he does know how to keep his hind end in place. So I'm going to get after him and correct him and put his hind end in place. Because this whole ride now, he's been deliberately kind of throwing that rib cage into me, throwing that hind end around, and I'm going to be more aggressive about correction at this point. And then the release is dropping my hands and asking him to move forward again. And my cameraman told me he needed to take a little break right here, so there's going to be a slight edit, and we played a little bit of game over. Sorry about that clip, but we were trying to get this whole entire ride for you. I apologize now. So from a walk, we're getting a nice stop and a complete 360 without a whole lot of glitches, although I do not like how he's still tucking his head a little bit too tight into his chest. You know, I just think they're more effective at the maneuver, and I find it easier to teach the maneuver if they will hold their head up in a natural carriage position. And I'd rather have them hold their head up higher, for me personally, to teach the maneuvers and then teach them to lower their neck and head. That's just easier for me, and it makes more sense for me. I know everybody has to do it the way that works for them and what makes sense to them and how they put all the pieces together. For me personally, I like their head up a little bit higher. I can teach them to put their head down at a later date. I'd rather teach them all these maneuvers in the most natural body and head carriage and neck carriage that they have, so that they learn how to use themselves to their fullest potential. We have another moment here where he kind of throws his rib cage and his hip into me when I put my leg on him. And you know, this is kind of one of those rides that I have at least one of them with every horse when I'm drilling on a little bit like this. Everybody kind of goes through this one ride. It's not just him by any means, and it doesn't matter what their pedigree is or if they're a mare or a gelding or a stallion. I am such a stickler about this lateral and moving over when I put my leg on them, and the counter bends, the counter arcs, the bending around my leg, the elevating the shoulder. Those are all things that are so important to me that I need them to have under their belt and kind of a foundation of them before we can move on to the next maneuvers and to the next step of their training. And here's something I find kind of interesting. Remember, he has been stronger to his left side, and going to the right, he is better today. And it makes you wonder why that is. I have these kind of rides and I go, okay, what was different today? And I know I'm kind of drilling on him, and we're definitely seeing how tolerant this horse is because I am drilling on him a lot. But this is the kind of the stuff that I need to do with them, so I either A, know how to place them when we market them, when I help my clients market their horses, to understand what kind of rider that they'll be most suitable for. I do have to kind of drill on them, and I have to see what they can mentally handle and push and push and push to see whether this sucker's going to jump off a cliff with somebody when they get mad, or if they're going to go, oh, okay, I'll step around that tree branch, no problem. I hope that makes sense, because I think we've either been in an accident ourselves, or we know of somebody that's had an accident where a horse has just hurt somebody really, really bad. And I don't ever want to hear a story where something that I've started has hurt somebody. That would just kill me if I knew that somebody was injured from a horse that I started because there was something about that horse's disposition that made him want to be a Jeffrey Dahmer to whoever his new owner was. And if you don't know who Jeffrey Dahmer is, Google him. I usually find out who the Jeffrey Dahmers are in my groundwork, so they're eliminated before I ever get on their back, and I might only have one per year. I would say most of the time horses' problems are caused by people, but every once in a while you do get one that is just hardwired very differently. And I've had somebody ask me, do I ever get 7, 8, 10 rides into one and they just flip a switch and they go, no, we're not doing this? And my answer was, at least in the last 4 years or so, 3-4 years, no, I don't, because they don't make it past the groundwork portion of my training to even get me on their back, because I do put a lot of pressure on them in the very beginning, because I want to see who is going to handle it emotionally and mentally and physically. Now we can see here he's starting to get mentally and emotionally quieter and more relaxed in this ride. he came through that roll a lot quieter. He picked up the wrong lead for me there. I'm just going to break him down and ask for it again. This is what I'm talking about. If you do not have him set up correctly coming out of that roll, you are not going to get the correct lead. So that is a feel, that is knowing when to ask, and that also takes a certain level of impulsion on his part. Because when I ask for it, if they do not go into it right away, then usually they fall out of frame and they pick up the wrong lead. And I think that's one thing that I've been trying harder in the last couple of years at least on my colts, at least after they get past this, first 20-30 ride mark. I start to get to where I asked for it and I want it right now. So when it comes to transitions, walk, trot, lope transitions, I need it right now. And I think that's the mark of a very broke horse, a very trained horse. Next time you're out in public and, like, say you're at a horse sale or you're at a horse show, watch the horses that take their transitions the easiest. Those are the ones I think that are really, really broke. They're not bolting into a lope, they're not jamming down into a trot or a walk, but they're real quiet and calm in their transitions. And if there's any sort of advice I can give to anybody, is work your transitions. Walk, trot, lope. Walk 10 strides, trot 10 strides, lope 10 strides, walk 10 strides, and work on your transitions. And that's going to improve your overall balance and relationship with your partner. So as I rattle on here, I'm kind of seeing that he is getting so much quieter through these maneuvers. And I did loosen up my reins there a little bit, rub him on his neck, pet him a little bit, let him get quiet, let him play game over. But look at how long it's taking. This ride is taking quite a bit longer than what we've been doing with him. He's also getting more physically fit. And on top of that, we have a lower temperature than what we've had. So we had this trifecta, and we had to be prepared to go that distance with him. But we're starting to get this good impulsion out of these rolls as his footwork becomes more and more correct. And we have to be committed as a rider to go into a ride like this and work through all that stuff. Could you imagine if I had stopped earlier on in this ride when it was kind of, more like a 3-point turn rather than this really smooth roll away on the fence? I think it would have been counterproductive, but I had to kind of had to drill on him a little bit. And I don't like drilling on horses this much. I've gotten away from it. If there were a lot of horses that I could go back and apologize to, I probably would, because I drilled on them way too hard. But I will do these maneuvers until they get correct, and then I move on to something else. But I can really appreciate how he's coming out of these rolls and he's taking the correct lead. And when he jumps out of the rolls, he's not speedy. He's not blasting out. He's staying quiet. And then we bring him down to a walk like this, and look, he's still walking quiet for me. He's not full of anxiety. He's not uptight. And here again, this is when it shows me that I'm doing my job correctly and he's retaining the information. Whenever I can do a maneuver and they get calm and quiet afterwards, then I know they've got it and I know that I've efficiently taught it to him. And going back this direction, anytime I go away from the gate, so the arena gate is to the north, I was trying to roll him back to the right. Anytime I roll away from that gate, it's going to be more difficult, okay? So when you guys are working in your arenas at home, keep that in mind. When you're trying to work your horses away from the direction that they want to go, use that to your advantage when you're teaching these maneuvers. And I just kind of broke up the monotony there a little bit for him, bent him around the other direction, didn't pick a fight, and set him back up again and asked him to do it again. I mean, what a cool dude, and he got it. That is really, really satisfying for me to watch. And I lied to you. I told you I was going to show you another place where these pants were not conducive to riding in them today, and I distinctly remember losing one of my stirrups when, I think it was in the very beginning, when we were changing directions a bunch, and I must have not seen it. If one of you guys seen it, you can point it out to me, but I did lose my stirrup because I lost my grip and slipped in the saddle in these pants. So I can't emphasize that enough. Yeah, they didn't work out for me like I had planned. I rode in them, oh shoot, back in the fall when we brought the cows home, and all I did was ride behind cattle and push them down the road, and I really didn't have to maneuver back and forth too hard, and we didn't go very fast, and so I thought they worked great. But then once I started actually getting after it on him, I found out they weren't as great as I thought. But if you guys see it, I did drop my stirrup in the it was roughly in the beginning of this ride. So one of the reasons I keep on doing the rollaway, breaking down to a trot, circling him back, stopping him and rolling away again, is I continue to get to work on the same direction over and over again. And I'm also trying to kind of play him out a little bit because I want to work on his stop. I want him to be stopping harder for me. And right here he comes down to a trot really nice for me. I set him up to stop him, and he just kind of pushes right through it. And I kind of had to back him off my hands just a little bit, and he was ready to roll, and he's starting to anticipate the game now. And so I bent him around, down-regulated real fast, tried to play the game again. And again, change direction. Don't hesitate to change directions. Too many people get stuck on that same old circle, that same boring circle. It's okay to change directions. While I'm walking and playing game over, I'm going to start working on the leg yield and elevate that front end over so it starts like a counter arc, and the front 2 feet are going to make a separate track from the hind 2 feet, and we're only going to get a couple of steps at a time, if that, because remember, up to this point he's been kind of crabby and pushing on me, wanting to drop that shoulder, drop that rib cage. So when I'm wanting to counter arc him from right to left, I'm going to take that right rein up towards my left shoulder, and I'm going to counter arc his head to the right, but ask those shoulders to move left. And I'm just trying to get a little bit more control of his shoulders. And we get little teeny bits at a time. It's not a whole lot, and it's not drastic at first. But this is the foundation to the trotting side pass and the loping side pass. I never did ride this colt with spurs. Usually by now I have put on a pair of spurs to ride these horses in, and it's mostly to expose them to it and they get the experience Most of my clients ride their horses with spurs, and so I just want to prepare them for that. You know, and if I had ridden him with spurs at this point, it might have improved some of this lateral work with him, and I just never did, and I knew I was going to be the one to get back on him this coming spring and summer of 2019, and so I can address that when I get back on him next time around. I get a really nice side pass coming up right here. You know, and don't be afraid to use the tools that you have at hand. I'm just using the arena rail here to make this side pass. He's elevating that shoulder, moving the front end over for me nicely, following nicely, and staying pretty square and pretty perpendicular to that rail for me. And I let him out of it. He walks off quiet. I kind of have this moment here where I'm starting to give him some pressure to stop, and he walks right through my hands as I'm asking him to stop, and he's just kind of pushing. And so I got really aggressive with him right here and backed him off my hand pressure. You know, these are the kind of things that we really need to watch and be careful of as riders. Remember, we're always training them. We also have to be really careful how far we take it, because I could have really gotten super aggressive and done a lot of jerking and hands way up in the air and lots of banging on him, but I just held him and kind of pulled back and, you know, got some steps backwards. You know, looking at the video now, I knew this part of the ride was coming up. I remember distinctly when we videoed it, I remember thinking, oh, that's not going to look very good. And it didn't look as bad as it felt to me when it happened. But we have to address that and know how to address it and know how far to take it. Because I tell you what, if this was something that was speed bred, they probably never would have taken that kind of me being assertive, that kind of correction. They probably would not have accepted it. So every type of horse is different. This guy is starting to get a little, you guys can see this, he's starting to get a little pushy on me, and he is getting tired. And so the type of correction that I give him is going to be very different than the type of correction I might give, say, a red speed bred mare, okay? And I'm sure some of you guys can relate to that. Now he's starting to move his shoulders and move over for me really nice on that lateral stuff. Did you see him move off the rail there really nicely for me? I was really pleased with that. That was a big deal for me, so I stepped off him right there. I mean, that was what I was working towards the entire ride, and I was so happy to get those few steps. And see how well-behaved Weatherby is? He stays out of the way until I step off. And that's all I've ever wanted him to do, is to sit outside the arena and watch me ride, and then come on over when I get off the horse. All right, well, that ride didn't start out how I expected, but we worked through it, and I think we improved the horse by the end of the ride, and he's a little bit better for it. And we started to find some holes in the training, and so we had to go back and work through some things and just keep on working through it and practicing it correctly and not letting him get away with things. And I made a lot of mistakes today. I had some saddle fit issues, and I may try a different saddle next time around. And these are not the right pants to wear when I ride, but they were warm and they were slippery. So not making excuses, but that's just one of my observations today. Anyway, I hope you subscribed. I hope you've watched the first 14 rides, and this makes number 15. And we've got 5 more to go, and it looks like we have weather in the 30s, 20s, and 30s for the next week, and maybe a little bit of snow. So we're going to get back out in the pasture again, too, and get some rides out before we call it good with this guy and kick him back out. So thanks for watching. Sure appreciate it, and hope you have a good one.